As I mentioned earlier, it's really important to get nice sharp chisels. This is very important for things like dovetails, kumiko jigs, kumiko work that you're doing, and so on. It could be anything. So getting nice sharp chisels is very important. And the best way to do that is to use a leather strop. And a leather strop is just a piece of wood with a strip of leather and some green polishing compound rubbed on top. And we use a pulling back motion to get a nice sharp polished chisel, sorry. And this is what it looks like. So I don't know if you can see there, but it's pretty much a mirror of a reflection on your chisel bevel, just to get it nice and sharp. And the best way to do that is by using a leather strop. So to find out how I made this, please continue watching. So in order to make a leather strop, first there's a few items that you'll need in order to get this created. So I'm just using a piece of MDF just because it's a nice flat surface, and you need a flat surface for your chisels to hone against. You also need a strip of leather. It doesn't really matter what colour, what it looks like, but the side we're going to be using is the actual rough side, not the smooth side. So it really doesn't matter what colour or what it looks like, it's just a piece of scrap leather which you can use. And to adhere the leather to the MDF, I'm going to be using super glue. The reason being is it's quick, it's fast, and it'll do what it needs to do. It just needs to hold this onto the MDF. It doesn't need to do any more than that. And yeah, so let's go ahead and start that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just make sure this is nice and flat. And as you can see, this is a new piece of MDF, so it is pretty flat. If I just put a square reference to that, you can see what I mean. So it's as flat as you're going to get. There's nothing you need to worry about. The reason it needs to be flat is because when you're riding the chisel bevel against the surface, so it'll be for this bevel here, you need to make sure that the surface is nice and flat, so it doesn't create any imperfections in your sharp chisel. And the reason for this is that we want to get a nice polished finish on this. Which brings me to this green block. This green block is a polishing compound. It's ideal for metals like steel and basically the metal used for chisels, or knives and scissors, for example. So I'll show you how we use this after, but let's get started to prepare and put this all together. So I've just cut this to a rough distance, so you can have it as big as you want and as small as you want. The size I've gone for is 20.5 by 7 centimeters. So it's a fairly decent size. You just want to be able to get a nice motion with the chisel when you're doing this. If it's too short, obviously you're not going to get much of a motion. You'll be doing shorter passes. But the whole point is we're going to be pulling back. We're not going to be going forward. It's just going to be a pulling back motion. So you want to have a nice surface to work with. And this size just kind of, I feel it works for me. And the piece is 18mm thick, so I can clamp this into my vise and it will hold in place. And again, it's just a piece of MDF, so if it does get ruined, and this leather's pretty cheap anyway, so you can just replace it. So there's no point using any hardwood or anything like that. You can if you have them scrapped, but it really isn't any point, to be honest. So the first thing we're going to do is just give your leather a good wipe, and just to make sure, because it is quite a rough leather, I'm just going to use a little bit of sandpaper just to rough it up a bit more. And I'm just going to tear a little bit of this. So this is just a bit of 180 grit sandpaper I'm going to use. I just tore a little bit. All I'm going to do is just scratch the surface a little bit. The reason we're doing this is because we want to make sure that the leather sticks nicely to it, and if it's too smooth, then it obviously won't stick very well. And again, we're not using this side, so this is the side that we're going to put glue on. So just adding some scratches into that so it can stick nicely. So that's all you really want, to be honest. Nothing more than that. Just make sure your surface is not got any extra dust or any unwanted bits on there. And what we're literally going to do is just take the super glue, sorry, this is a new bottle, and we're just going to spread it evenly across the plank, and we're going to then, using a few clamps, we're going to just put some pressure onto this. So I'm going to just stick this on first, and you want to get to the edges as much as you can. Just show you on camera. You really don't need a lot of this, because it's quite thin, it does spread. So just get this on top, just make sure it goes right to the edges, and just give it a good stretch either way. And you could probably just hold that there for a few seconds and it will stick itself. But yeah, you want to just give it a nice stretch, because you want to make sure the leather is stretching this way, because when you do the paring motion, it will stretch the leather even more. So if you stretch it now, it will be easier for later. And what we're going to do, we're just going to get another piece of wood and just clamp this on. So I've just got another piece of wood, doesn't matter what it is. We're just going to use this to now apply some pressure onto this. So I've got some clamps, I'm just going to use and clamp this in place. And this is just really to help allow the leather to really stick. And again, the super glue will be enough, just got to give it some time so it can dry. And then once it's dried, we'll trim off the excess leather, and then I'll show you how we're going to use this polishing compound to get our chisels nice and polished out. So that's been drying for about 5 minutes now, and that's probably more than enough. It is super glue, so it does dry pretty quickly. So we're just going to take these clamps off. Don't need these anymore, so let's get rid of these. And get rid of that scrapwood. So it's stuck nicely to where it needs to stick. And all we're going to do now is just using a sharp blade. You can use Stanley blade or any blade, to be honest. And we're just going to trim away the excess leather. Sorry, this blade isn't particularly sharp, so just give this a snap quickly. Should have really done that first, to be honest. Doesn't need to be perfect. At the end of the day, it is a tool, so it's not going to be on show, it's not going to be on display, and its purpose is going to be to get messy, so don't worry about it. So we've got rid of all the leather, and what you want to do is just maybe use a vacuum and just get rid of any dust that's in there, and then we can show you how we're going to use this compound. So I'm going to quickly hoover that up. So we've got rid of all the dust that's on there, and now we can pretty much use it. It's ready to go. So that's pretty much a leather strop ready made. So we could go ahead and use that. And how we would use that is you use the polishing compound to rub onto this, and this chisel's already been sharpened, and you just use a pulling back motion to get it nice and polished. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to put this into a vise and we'll get this going. So I've got the leather strop in place, nicely clamped into my vise. It does make it easier. You could clamp it onto your bench, whatever's easy for you. I've got a vise, I'm just going to use it. So it just gives you that third hand to hold this. And you really want to make sure this is secured down when you're doing this, so it just makes it a lot more easier, more comfortable. But the next thing is to now rub this with some of this green polishing compound. The green one is for steel, preferably metals that are used for chisels and knives and scissors and so forth. So what we're going to literally do is just going to rub some of this on here. You're probably thinking, oh wow, it looks like a mess now, but it really doesn't really matter. Like I said, it is a tool, so we want to just make sure we get enough of this compound all over. And as you do more and more chisels, you will be adding more of this compound. But I'll just start with that for now. So the way you want to do it, you don't want to use the back on the leather, because it will maybe create a burr the wrong way on your chisel and so on. You maybe spend a bit of time to get that as flat as possible. It's not polished at the moment, but I'll show you what we'll do instead after. But for now, we're going to focus on the bevel side. And like I said, we don't want to be using a forward motion. It's always going to be a back motion. And you want to keep pressure onto the chisel at all times. So with this hand, I'm just holding it like this, just to give me the angle. This isn't really doing anything, but just pulling back. That's all that's doing. The downward force is going to be this hand, which is going to determine an angle of the bevel and nothing else. So I'm going to keep that there. And what you want to do is about 30 strokes. So just count in your head how many. Just try to use the whole surface area that you have. You'll see as you're doing it, the green colour changes. That colour changing, almost going a bit dark, is where it's polishing. I'll just stop there for a second. You'll see that the tip of the chisel is getting nice and polished. And you just want to make sure that, take your time and get the full front bevel of the chisel. This does take time to get the hang off in terms of getting the right angle and stuff, so take your time, don't rush. You can't over polish a chisel, so you've got nothing to worry about. And again, it's the backward motion that we're looking for. To me, that's probably more than enough. I don't need to get this bit all polished. It's just the tip that I'm looking for, so probably just 1/4 of an inch where the polish is. You can carry on going. You can try and polish the full bevel. It's entirely up to you. Just add a little bit more, just going to rub that on top. This is what I was saying about this is going to get messy, so don't worry about it being perfect. So if I just show this on the camera, just give me 1 second. You can see exactly how polished that is now. It's almost a mirror finish, and that's exactly what you want. But you can see on the back, there's still loads of scratches. So in order to polish that out, we're not going to use the leather for that. What we're going to do is, we're going to keep this as a versatile block. So you've got the leather on one side, And on the other side you just got the bare MDF. And we're going to use this side to now flatten the back of the chisel. The reason being is you want to make sure when you're doing this you've got a nice flat surface, and you're going to go with this motion this time. You could even do that because there's no leather that's going to get tore back. But in order to do that, we're just going to literally get this compound and just rub it on. This is why I said don't bother using the hardwood, because there isn't really any point. And you'll see the colour change as the metal starts chewing away. So this is nice and green at the moment. As soon as I start moving the back of the chisel, you'll see the colour of the green going darker and darker, and it almost goes black, and that's where you know the metal is actually getting polished. It does make a little bit of mess, but it doesn't matter, we can get that cleaned up. And then we're going to just do some strokes going back, keeping the chisel nice and flat. It doesn't really matter how you hold the chisel as long as it's flat on the surface. Let's give that a nice clean. And just wipe that down. You'll see it won't get rid of the marking so much, but if you look at the tip has got a nice, sorry, just focus on that. You can see it's almost got a nice polish finish there, especially this side here. And that's what you're looking for. Again, we need to make sure the tips are really nice and sharp, and that will give you perfect sharp chisel. So that's pretty sharp, to be honest. The best way to test it is just get a bit of pine, get a bit of the old paper trick. And you can see that it's just really, it's just no hassle whatsoever. It's just cutting straight into that, and that's what you want. You really need to make sure your chisels are nice and sharp using some diamond plate or whatever sharpener you have, and using this leather strop as a final sort of finishing to your chisel sharpening process. And that's what it is. So I won't be doing the back so much, because I really don't bother about getting the polish on the polish done on the back, because it's, for me, for my sort of work, it's not necessary. But to get it on the front bevel, it's definitely worth doing. It makes that chisel just that little bit more sharper, especially if you're doing things like dovetails, or you're doing kumiko patterns. You're using this to pare away some of the timber itself. It really makes a difference. But yeah, it's definitely worth making. And like I said, this probably cost me, I don't know, I think the leather was £1.50 on eBay, scrap bit of MDF and some super glue, and don't forget the green polishing compound. And that's it, and you have a leather strop. So yeah, hope you like the video. If you do, please like, subscribe. If you'd like some more woodworking videos or some more tips, just comment below what you want to see, what you don't want to see, and maybe even some suggestions of what I could do to improve. Like I said, I'm new to this. I'm not exactly a professional. I do this as a hobby and as a part-time thing. So anything suggestions wise that you can give me, by all means, just comment below. Thank you.